This video deals with the least known combustion chamber modifications to further enhance power plus efficiency by reducing the possibilities of detonation. It may be lengthy but part of trying to explain it in detail without getting many confused. Please subscribe, like, and share Ben's channel. Thank you.
Hey guys, it's been a little bit, been missing, but I feel very good today. And now we'll talk about something quite interesting. We'll talk about detonation. How to minimize detonation. We can't completely eliminate detonation, but we'll talk about the causes, what actually happens in the combustion chamber and the pistons. We'll go to the detail, like I said, and what are the fixes. Meaning softening the head, V-groove, directed V-groove now, not just a V-groove that aimlessly points at one direction in the combustion chamber. But what I'm trying to say is we're actually pointing the effectiveness of the V-groove where the problem areas are, around the intake valve, close to the cylinder wall. And also, what can we do to the piston in case of a flat top in order to make the V-groove work. And I've done that with several engines now to much positive success. You can never really eliminate detonation. That's a given fact. But if we can minimize it, then we're good. It happens from 8 to 1. Low compression can open yourself up to detonation, correct? And it's not just high compression. It happens in just about almost all compression ratios, and I will highlight this. So we will look at all the advancements in combustion chamber design to minimize that. And like I said, and I said this long time ago, what we're looking at is quench is an excellent technique to minimize detonation. It does happen. But at the same time, quench can become an enemy of a racing engine. Very high compression, quench kind of has a tendency to go backwards on us. And fortunately, with lower compression ratios, quench is a lifesaver. Very high compression ratio, it is kind of dangerous. And we will highlight that as well here. And have patience with me, guys. We will go through this thing, and hopefully we can help everybody make their engines last longer. I mean, there's no such thing as 100% fix-all. There's always some kind of negative effect. There's always a trade-off with whatever things we do. Okay, and just like in compression, you increase the lift, you make the valve depth deeper. No, the valve relief. But the deeper you make the valve relief, you lose compression as well because you're adding CC to the combustion chamber or the whole combustion chamber area. So then again, you lower the lift, you lose power at the same time. Okay, especially if you're not ideal to your flow rate of your cylinder head. If it's like 900 capability and you lift it at 900 and you need a certain amount of compression ratio to accomplish your goals of high horsepower and torque, and you won't make the valve relief, you make the valve relief deeper, your compression drops, you're chasing your tail over and over. So just like quench, it helps detonation, but as soon as you get up to the higher RPMs and higher horsepower level, or mainly high compression, it can backfire. And we will highlight that. And this is going to be interesting, guys, so follow on. Let's start. Okay, I made the statement about an engine detonating on low compression. And here's the reason why. we have a closed chamber and, well, we have an open chamber and a closed chamber drawing here. Now, what actually happens with an open combustion chamber engine, the flow, intake flow comes in either from this angle or that angle, but when they do come in, they discharge into the combustion space or combustion chamber with hardly any interference. So basically, when it does happen this way, the flow comes in and it's not quite active because this is just an opening, all right? And as opposed here, there's a combustion chamber wall right here that when the valve opens up, it comes in, it hits that wall, either it comes in this way or that way, and it has a tendency to get some mixture motion. This combustion chamber wall tends to give it like a circular motion, or sometimes a tumble motion. Either it come in this way or it come in this way with a circular motion. It doesn't happen hardly with an open chamber. Basically, when the valve opens up, it discharges, and guess what? It doesn't have much motion, mixture motion or activity. And here's the key element. When the piston comes up, all right, when you initiate combustion, the piston's coming up, and when it started to come up, it sees the closed part of the combustion chamber, which is not present here. And anytime the combustion chamber comes up close to the piston, it has this motion. Okay? It claps it and steers them up and brings them toward the center. And the fuel molecules and the air molecules are mixed up real good because you excited them by doing this. They're spread more evenly because you excited them. Over here, there's no motion anywhere close to that. So basically, the fuel comes in and just hangs around whichever, and usually it comes in this way. A lot of them super rich, lean here. Since it's been kicked over, the dormant areas here is pushed into the middle where they would actually light up more actively. The flame propagation is more active. Over here, nada, none. They're dormant. The disparity between rich area and lean area are so vast that the rich areas here lights up, okay? And the rich areas here, since it's more towards the center now, spark is initiated, they start to burn more evenly. Over here is very slow because a rich mixture is a very slow flame front. Okay, it's not as active, not like here. So, when the flame front starts to expand, the low compression open chamber head has a vast area of lean situation here that's not been pushed up by the quench, and guess what happens? Even a low compression, the pressure and temperature comes up here rapidly while the piston is coming up on it, auto ignition starts. All right? Because remember, if it's lean right here, the fuel molecules are farther from each other, and when they're farther from each other, it takes a while to go from one fuel molecule to the next, to line up the next one and the next, and so forth, so on. It's a much slower event. Thereby, basically with the piston coming up, pressure and temperature comes up, auto ignition starts there. Here, it's somewhat eliminated because the lean areas here is pushed toward the middle. There's more complete burn here. And a more complete burn requires less ignition timing as opposed to here. You have to light this up. So when you look at an open chamber cylinder head, it requires 42, 44 degrees of initial and total timing. A lot less with this, probably 38, 40, if that, okay? But if you have the more advanced combustion chamber, yes, it'll require a lot less, substantially a lot less. But here it's such a lazy combustion scenario that's being presented, and it burns slowly here and even slower there. Temperature, pressure spike, bam, detonation or secondaries happen. So when somebody tells you that, oh, this is higher compression, it'll detonate, well, not necessarily. But then again, we'll proceed from here on. A very tight quench on 11 to 1, 10.5 to 1 will detonate less than an 8 to 1. Okay? Granted, everything is basically even. That scenario, especially here, will reverse itself with very high compression. Now I'm talking about extreme. High horsepower level, high compression, it will detonate. There's no buts or ifs around it. It's kind of hard to prevent that scenario from actually happening. Therefore, remember, the spark plugs are here. This is the farthest area from the spark plug. It's closest here, close there, farthest here, same thing here. When it's farther away from the main source of the ignition, all right, then you have the scenario of actually secondaries or detonation spots happening in the chamber. And this is very much a very, very possible scenario. And like I said on my previous video about combustion chambers and all that, I talk about my Cleveland, and I had a 4-barrel head on it, closed chamber, towing my race car up Bakersfield, and you know, I had what, 10.5, 10.7 or something like that. Now I switched back to an open combustion chamber, and the doggone thing detonated worse than when I had high compression. This is the reason why. Not much mixing going on here. A lot of dormant area, uneven, rich area, super lean, or hardly anything really happening there. And that's a scenario that starts to develop. Okay, let's backtrack a bit. This is what happens on the combustion chamber at low speed with not much momentum happening on the port speed or port flow speed. And you can tell right here that the short side is able to navigate the fuel and prevent this lean condition here. Right now at low RPM, this is what it sees. Idle, low mid-range. The fuel being heavy, the air being light, it's able to take this turn and negotiate that and keep this basically rich, and that as well. But here goes the next one. A little bit high up on the RPM, you can see that the momentum of the heavier fuel molecules start to go to the long side. And look what happens to the short side. This is the intake valve pocket that we talk about that melts. All right? So it has flow speed or port speed. The heavier air can take this turn, of course, but the heavier fuel molecules keep going, or droplets, and they keep going to the long side. And the next one here is the high-speed portion. Look what happens. Now the column comes in. Usually the fuel column with the air runs towards the middle. It's amazing, but that's what it does. Most of the fuel particles are on the middle part of the port. And then the weight shoves into the long side and sprays there. And guess what happens here? Very, very few activity that is evident on the short side of the port. This is an issue, and this layout is like a 4V engine of a domestic car, which is the spark plugs over here. And this is a 4-valve layout, a cross section of it.
This are the pistons off a 4-valve engine. The intake valve relief corners nearest the cylinder walls are melted right downstream of the short side radius of the ports.
What we're looking at is the old C302, or was this a B302 head? pre-type head before they ended up with the Yates C3L, D3, and SC1 high port. This is a lower angle. That's why you look at the short side. And what actually happens at high RPM, the predominant flow comes in this way and wants to run to a straight trajectory. The heavy fuel particles will slam on the floor, but it keeps going to this long side. It can't quite make it. And the problem area we're looking at is right there. That's where it starts to melt. That's the valve pocket, and most of the fuel slammed right there. Very, very lean condition, just like the previous drawing, where on the import it has the same issue, same problem that we could see. That's why when I spoke to one guy, well, actually, one of the hardest running import guys from years ago called me up. Hey, we melted our pistons. I said, how bad did the intake side melt? And he goes, how'd you know that? It's the same as the V8, okay? And it's very lean right here. It can quite take that turn, okay? So if this manifold wasn't there, you'd be looking at it from this angle. It's called line of sight. The more you can see the diameter of the valve, the better it will flow. Okay, granted it's shaped correctly, you know, it doesn't have too much expansion coming in, or more like, if it narrows down a bit, more like a venturi, so it speeds up the flow coming into the valve, giving a ram effect. Now, if this was a flow bench, it was cut right here, and you float it with this radius plate, let's say, it'll flow real good. But if you notice the higher sheet metal intake, the port is standing up this way, okay, even the floor, because the flow wants to run in a straight line like this. It won't look good on the flow bench. The flow bench don't like it, but that's the flow bench talking to you. An engine with a sheet metal intake, it's really, the port angle comes in this way and bends, one bend, okay, and then the floor looks like that, because this is what it wants to see. That's why when you look at a port and try to visualize it, your eyeball is at this angle, so you can see the whole diameter of the valve. Very important. And the manifold, the sheet metal manifold for a full race setup, would also like the port angle to come in real high. On a flow bench, it won't work good, but on a running engine, that's exactly what it likes, not this layout. But you have a 4-barrel lower angle coming in here. It is what it is. But the new sheet metal intake, even with one dominator or 4-barrel, the port angle is this way, really high coming in, and the carburetor is sitting very, very high. Okay, with a V plenum, or like a flat plenum with a high angle port coming in this way. Okay, so remember, this is the problem area that we're talking about. This is a picture of one of my engines from years ago that I used on this video, but I like to show. I made a pass on this thing on my race car years ago, and I cut off on the end because I know I was going to take it apart and look at it. I wanted to see what it's telling me. As it shows right here, the shape of the combustion chamber is really obvious because the dome here has been profiled to match the combustion chamber. But that is partially an issue that I wanted to show here. What I want to show here is this very lean condition. Remember, this is the short side coming in. On this Ford, the port comes in this way. All right? Now, when it comes in that way, it's still quite make the short side of the port or short side radius. So everything runs towards this way. And when you see, look at the discoloration or lack of coloration. This, if I would have ran it a little bit more leaner, it probably would have melted. Okay? It would have been very bad. But as far as I know, this was close, or the plug looked real good. This is just a natural after effect. Too tight of a quench, like this is showing, kind of prevents any of the fuel from effectively burning from where the spark plug is at. To go there, it's tight in here. It doesn't want to combust any of the gases. And what's actually shown here is that I think this is starting to pit like a sandpaper on the ring side there, on the crevice area. And what it does is it starts to heat up and it's combusting real nice, but you can start to see the lean area. And what it's actually doing is that it couldn't quite make it here, the burn or the flame front. Therefore, it is probably close to detonating or about to light up, okay, and create a secondary and have a collision of flame fronts from here and then from here as well. But this then starts just about ready to go, okay? Because remember, on the cooler parts of the combustion chamber, you will see this dark coloration or about a very thin carbon. When it's real hot, you have hardly any carbon buildup. That tells you right there. Okay? Quite obvious. Before I forget, notice on the end right here. It can happen, and it did with here. This is a lean area. When the flow comes in, they go to the chamber, and this has been a race area. There's a pocket of lean spot right there. Could I have fixed that? Yes, I did. I tapered this off a bit, okay, just to get some fuel activity around that general area. If you notice, it's starting to heat up right there as well. Soon enough, maybe I will have some issue with combustion seal between the two cylinders. It's obvious. So when I laid this down and had fuel able to be in that location, then I got rid of that lean spot. I could have had an issue here for double burn, both ends, which this is rare. It happens. I've seen it happen on Chevys as well. But this is very obvious. But here you can see, okay, because it's kicked up. I don't remember how high this is. 100,000 or something like that. 100,000 of rise from the main deck. And it kind of hit the fuel. So they went in this way. Look, as you can see. Okay. It's a little bit hot there that's really the origin of the spark plug there. And it looped around here. And that was a concern when I saw that one. And I've seen it more than once, many times as well, but not as much as this situation where the exhaust starts to burn. This one will burn first, and this will come in shortly thereafter. Okay, it'll follow up. But usually this one burns, piston fails, and this never gets to the actual burning of the area as well, because the engine failed right out the get-go already. And usually it'll start colorizing, and you won't even see that. But this was about to fail, and even right there. Still hanging in there good, but this is already showing you something's going to go on. So it can also burn the exhaust, just like on this particular example.
This is a sample of a V8 piston mistakenly described as too tight of a ring gap. If it is too tight and Ben is sure it happens, then why does it always blows through the intake valve pocket? This is an obvious lean condition, not a tight ring gap. If the gap was wrong, then it could have lifted the piston top just about anywhere in its circumference. If it blows just like here, then you should reconsider the ring gap comment.
Now that you've seen what makes detonation possible inside the combustion chamber or piston, the causes, now we'll try to see if we can somehow present here in this video the fixes, okay, or some kind of a prevention. I don't know if we could completely eliminate it. That's a tough act to follow, but it's possible that you could at least minimize the possibility. But like anything, if it's extreme, it's almost impossible. A certain point where you reach the maximum of any combination, and you're going to end up with catastrophic failures due to other circumstances that are present in the combustion process, and there are so many. Okay, from very thin valve margin to hot spot in the combustion chamber, inconsistent distribution of the air and fuel mix inside the combustion space, all these things, etc. But let me forward here some of the fixes or possible fixes, so at least we could somehow delay or at least prevent the onset of detonation. Here it is. Area signifies the quench clearance from the top of the piston to the flat side of the combustion chamber. What actually happens at 5 degrees before top dead center, okay, on the ignition cycle or the ignition stroke, the flame front starts right about here with a sphere and easily consumes this side because it's closest to the spark plug, and slowly propagates towards the end of the cylinder. What happens here, the very lean areas of that combustion chamber on the intake valve closest to the cylinder wall that I showed earlier, the lean condition here is pushed into the center of the combustion space and is consumed. Not all of them. Some are left dormant in there and they don't really get stripped. Now, if you have a very, very tight clearance there, like what Smokey Nick said, sometimes you gotta hit the piston and the head to make the most power, or slap the head with the piston to make the most power. What he literally meant is not to have contact, but a very tight clearance here that it pushes some of that air fuel in here, okay, and gets consumed. And if there's anything left in there, okay, if it's not a perfect quench, especially for street level or some kind of serious racing, not all out racing, there are dormant air fuel left over there that was not consumed by the main flame front here. Auto ignition or secondaries have a hard time developing over here because the main force or burn happens right about this area here. And when it gets to that point, maximum pressure is realized at 5 degrees to past TDC, 5 to 10 degrees after top center is where maximum pressure is realized on a combustion cycle. And what happens, the piston starts to come down. If there's any more dormant or air fuel that hasn't burned around this area, the pressure and the spike of temperature isn't high enough with some kind of compression, not extreme compression and high RPM like what we're going to talk about later. That this part may or may not combust. So sometimes when you adjust your total timing to make this earlier or a little bit later, to make sure you complete the burn at the proper crank angle, and if you want it done by 15 degrees or some say 17 degrees after top center on the ignition stroke, this sometimes will light up, or more likely than not, at street level compression and not so high compression ratios, it will stay dormant or it will not light up, and you're good to go. That is what you call perfect ignition timing and everything. So you're not going to get any auto ignition around here, okay? Because whatever has been consumed will not light up. Here is your concern. At high RPM or street level RPM, some race RPMs, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, perhaps, it will not more likely get away from it. If the compression is not extraordinarily high, that it will stay put, and by the time the piston goes from 5 degrees before top dead center to 5 degrees after top dead center and all the way down, when the quench area starts to get uncovered, when piston starts to come down and opens up that area, hopefully there's not enough temperature pressure spike to create an auto ignition point around there. So that is what I'm talking about by having a good quench. This is controllable at anything short of all-out racing. At full race application, ignition front happens, it goes right this way and consumes this area or the quench pad, and you notice, like I said earlier, this is the farthest one. It starts to propagate. This is now high compression ratio, okay? Talking about competition compression ratio. It is very tight here. That's why you don't want it to be too much of a very tight clearance, because you want some of the flame front to get in there and consume that area. But let's say you are tight. That becomes a critical area, because once it's very tight, the flame front could quite progress in there and consume that. Because once you consume whatever air fuel is there, regardless lean or rich, but more likely lean, if it's consumed, then you have no problem. But if it's not consumed and stays dormant in there, what actually happens, after 5 degrees before top dead center, when it comes out, the quench will start to tighten up, and hopefully that it controls the flame, because the flame front has a tendency to start from the spark plug area and starts to accelerate from a sphere or a pre-flame condition, about 2 degrees, 3 degrees, and it starts to flame up and propagate. It starts to accelerate. And when it starts to accelerate, it wants to speed up, right? And when it wants to speed up, it sees this area here, and somehow that is impeded or quenched, okay, or stopped a bit. And so, because sometimes when the flame front gets too fast, it goes in there and starts to accelerate, and this one sees a pressure, temperature spike, boom, detonation. So that's what our issue with the competition engine. It can climb up there and create a temperature pressure spike and starts to consume. That's an issue. If it's too tight, by the time it gets past or towards the end of the ignition cycle, 5 degrees after top dead center, it starts to come down. And when it starts to come down, it uncovers the quench. It sees the temperature and pressure, boom, explosion. Okay? So you're in a situation here where the tight quench kind of stops the flame front from going in, accelerating, temperature, pressure spike, let go, detonation. But now, 5 degrees before top dead center, ignition cycle, starts to come down, it starts to uncover, the flame front sees an opening, it keeps on accelerating, secondaries. That's a dilemma. Secondaries would start right there. This is a dilemma with a very tight quench clearance on any given engine. How are we going to fix that? That's why too tight of a quench clearance can be dangerous. Too loose can also be dangerous. You're up between a rock and a hard place as far as ignition characteristics on a competition engine. What are we going to do? Not only that, at high RPM, this gets real tight because the rods stretch, correct? It gets super tight. That may help you or that may hurt you, but at the same time, let's say you're right at 94, 9600 RPM. It gets super tight. But once you shift, now the RPM drops. Now you're, let's say, at 8075 or whatever. That quench gets a little bit opened up. And when it's opened up like that is when you have issues of auto ignition because you didn't push enough of that mixture out into the main burn area. It is dormant there, it's hanging around, just waiting to explode. Because the more, if you consume that correctly around the quench area at the very edge of the cylinder, if you consume that initially, okay, then you won't have any issue about secondary. And we will touch bases on how we can make that happen. How we consume that dormant area of very lean piston or very lean area around the very edge of the cylinder wall and the intake valve. How are we going to figure that out? Quench hurts us, quench help us. How are we going to do this? Because at high RPM it becomes real tight, okay? And the flame front couldn't get in there. If it's a lower RPM than 9,000, let's say you're at 7,500, it can't possibly go in there and create a secondary explosion, because once you're creating some of the flame front coming in here and migrating in that tight area, it creates a temperature pressure spike and auto ignition can start. So you're kind of like stuck in a very tough spot. Too tight, it won't burn. Somewhat loose, it burns around here, creating a temperature pressure spike. Secondaries happen. What do we do? Next one coming up.
Softened combustion chambers. What is obvious here is the gradual tapering of the quench pads and is a promising and effective fix for high RPM high horsepower engines that have issues with quench-produced detonation. Ben will explain how this taper reduces the chance of detonation. Look at the principle behind this concept. From traditional quench.
Okay, what we're looking at is a softened combustion chamber compared to the previous description. The blue area that you see here is much more expanded. And the logic behind that is, remember on the previous illustration, when the flame front starts from here and goes to this general area, it gets stopped and is somewhat, the flame propagation is restricted or impeded. Meanwhile, pressure and temperature spike starts from here, then you have your detonation or onset of detonation starts right here. Not much of a problem right here because it's close to the spark plug. But what we're saying is the farthest away, according to the flow distribution, is the lane area of the combustion chamber. Now, with the expanding flame front coming up to this blue area at a taper like this, what is obvious is the flame front starts to come in and has an easier time to go in and consume this flat area right here. There's a better chance, okay? And for a while I was led to believe that the flame front was expanding from a fast burn, okay, to an explosion if this is excessive. I really sincerely believe there are changes here of angle. 3, 5, and I heard somebody says as much as 18 degrees tapered. I think when you're already on the verge of a lot of tapering, that the flame front will in no way continue on and be a consistent burn. It'll slowly go from a rapid burn to an explosion. And if this taper here is somewhat excessive, I sincerely believe that you can have an open chamber effect on your otherwise softened cylinder head. But also, and I 50-50 about it, when the piston comes up, it's important you have this flat spot here, because that helps push some of these lean condition here towards this general area, so that when the flame front finally comes in, it gets consumed, and whatever's left in here is perhaps minimized or not quite as significant, but there's still a possibility. But I feel, as long as it is not excessive, what is the right amount? I guess it depends on the bore. It's up to the builder. Therefore, this softening can backfire if it's done too excessively. You turn your closed chamber softened head to a somewhat semi-open chamber. So it can really backfire on you in this area. So like anything, being conservative, it has its due advantage, because it will consume this problem area. The bad thing is your combustion chamber gets bigger, okay? And I don't know what to say about how this would transcribe, because sometimes I feel when you look at combustion chamber, the smaller the chamber, the better off you're going to be. But that is NA. On supercharged turbo nitrous, this has definitely some benefits. And I'll explain my fix to this general area. And it's somewhere between this and a tight quench. Okay, so I've done this for many years, and I feel this is one of those, but this might be a little tad expensive. That adds more to the expense of chamber modifications. This next combustion chamber modification to minimize or to basically prevent detonation, I've been doing for many years. I kept it to myself, and that's why I've been sensitive about people getting hold of my engines or cylinder head back then. I was only doing this to very few guys. And anyway, let me put it to you this way. When I first came across this, oh my God, 20 years ago or something like that. But shortly after that, or many years really, I had a good friend, ZELLE, who started the Mustang Madness racing series. And he visited at my shop. And then he goes, what's going on? What's up? So I gave him a ride in my convertible. And I said to him, if I take off in first gear, what if I take off in second gear? Sal, what's going to happen? He goes, well, it's going to probably stall out, or hesitate. I go, yeah, correct. What if I take off in third gear? What do you think is going to happen? He says, well, definitely probably bog down and fall flat in his face and shake or whatever. Well, I go, what if I did it in fourth gear? He goes, I got to see that. But anyway, I did. He was sitting right beside me on my convertible. It's an '89 Mustang with some ported heads, stock heads, not even GT40s. But I did this combustion chamber. And the heads, like I said, was ported with a mild cab. So I took off in second gear. He was like, okay, that was hardly nothing. All right, now let's try third gear. I took off in third gear. He's looking at me, and the car took off. It didn't hesitate, it didn't shake or sneeze and fall flat in his face or backfire, nothing. I go, okay, how about if I took off in fourth gear? He goes, oh, I have to see this. And remember, my 5-speed is it's got 355 gears on the back. It's not really geared low. It's average. It's a good street gear. So I took him in 4th gear, and he was really shocked because I did ride the clutch, but not to the point I want to burn it up. But I wanted to show him what is going on. So it took off, and when I was going about 35 miles an hour, I kicked it in 5th gear and I floored it. I punched it. Okay, and it didn't shake or backfire. It just slowly accelerated with no sign or hint of detonation. And Sal looks at me and goes, how were you able to do that? Could you tell me what you did? I said, buddy, if I had to tell you, I gotta kill you. But anyway, of course, he's my good friend, and I did it for him, and the rest is history. But then again, you know, I mean, it makes a believer out of you. So basically, I knew I was onto something, but it still wasn't how I do it today. This was years ago, and I used to do it in a straight format V-groove. Here it is. This is my configuration, or V-groove configuration, that I've done years ago. It's deeper here and tapers to a shallower area. Now, the one up here, I don't know what the benefits are. I'm not really sure, but no harm, no foul. I put it there anyway, just to get rid of any kind of dead area there, and introduce it on the quench side when the piston comes up to the flame, which is the spark plugs facing this way. Now, most of the, I know this is low compression, most of the column, well, the trap gases are here, lean condition. Remember, this long side, this is the short side. This lean area here, even on lower compression, will definitely produce detonation, especially even on street compression engines or street level compression engines. It can detonate here, especially when the RPM is about to bog down or slow. Then you have secondary ignition sources emanating from that area. Now, when the piston comes up to TDC, it's already burning. Some of these dormant lean gases here are pushed into the flame, and then from the flame front starts to propagate and expanding. Instead of hitting this area here and restricting its access to the lean areas, this one here allows it to go in and consume these gases here. It's more like a passageway. Should we say it's like a softening, but it's not. Okay, this V-groove, since it's tapered off, does the same thing. So, what it does is the flame goes in here and expands to this area and consume it much more readily. I found out at that point in time it likes quench to be between 39 to more than 45. Anything tighter, I think it didn't function quite as good. I don't know if, you know, so I just from my experience. If it's like a 32, you know, 35, it seemed like it didn't quite work as I like it to be, but I think it's going to have to do more experiment on that. Maybe I have to go deeper on it. All right. So, because it's very shallow on the edge. So that is itself right there is what you're looking at. This is my latest version of my V-groove. If you notice, this is, like I said from the previous video, previous picture. These are, in the description, these are the, how should I call it? Lean condition that starts for detonation. Racing engine or street engines, same thing, that lean area. If you notice, now I have what I call a directed V-groove. And let me show a more close-up picture. On this directed V-groove, I'm showing right there the lane spot, signified by the 2 red dots. Lane spot, onset of detonation. Again, I have this one here. I figured it's a very rich condition right here, because remember the flows come here, all right, and they accumulate, and then some of the fuel goes in and starts to basically lean out about this general area. That being said, the rich area here, when the ignition is started, this flame front, some of it on the piston movement to quench or TDC, ignition's already fired. It pushes some of that rich area to the combustion activity right about here. And then at the same time, once the flame front starts to expand, it introduces straight into the groove and consumes whatever rich mixture here is present. What I notice is the response of the engine is significantly improved. In fact, on testing with my drag cars, or one of my team cars, that is Erwin Kular, years ago, we had to change gearing because it was just having too much low end, or should I say offline torque, was enhanced big time. It started spinning the slicks. So we had to change gearing from 489 to like 456. Because it's burning so much more effectively right here. And my groove then on his car, because about 20 years ago or 15 years ago, it didn't quite, not directed as such as I show here. It was burning down this way, but still effectively quench or effectively enhance the quench pad of any engine, in particular his. That's why we saw a lot of power come out of it. Now, coming back. So, going up to TDC, rich area here is pushed towards the flame front. Flame front starts to expand more and more, and it goes back in here and blows back into the richer side, whatever's left of it, and consumes that area. Much more readily done without the groove. And over here, coming up to TDC, let's say 5 degrees before top dead center, ignition cycle. This one here pushes the lean condition around this area into the flame front. Whatever is left, this flame front starts expanding and blows back into the lean area, eliminating the onset of combustion. Remember, if you burned whatever is in here, there's no secondaries left. Okay, no secondary front left to explode, burn, or whatever. Put up a second pressure wave, probably destroying your piston or whatever, or head gasket. This in itself pushes the lean condition into the flame front or expanding flame front, and then when it expands real good, it can't quite jump into here, but more likely some will. But this one facilitates the flame front from coming in here and extinguishing this, not extinguishing, lighten up this lean area, preventing detonation from starting. Therefore, it is a good thing here to consume whatever's there before it starts giving you a problem. And this, should we say, gate or V-groove allows you to have that second front or the possible detonation front to be consumed, creating no more ignition points to be concerned with. Now you have a more defined quench pad here on this particular head than the previous one. Do this same thing, do that, but see this area here I highlighted in blue? Lay this down. Same thing here, lay this down. If you don't want the groove, lay this pad down a bit and lay that pad down a bit. Okay? So that without the groove, it can somehow, the flame front can go in there. And I wonder if that'll eliminate the detonation. But if you do decide to run a groove a V-groove, lay this pad down and lay that pad down. Okay? Okay, we're looking at an import head. The groove goes there and right there because that's the lean side. All right, or maybe you can still tilt it a little bit more aggressive this way. All right, and I think it will work, but this is just an illustration. Another one there. This is very important on this configuration because with the inlet coming in this way, okay, there's a tumble motion. Most of the fuel will slam right there. Very rich. And then when it turns around this way, tumble, this section here is very, very lean. Typical import head, Coyote included. All right, so when you have a tumble motion, all the heavy fuel drops right there. And very, very lean right here. Perhaps maybe even worse than the V8. But that's just an opinion. I could be proven wrong. But anyway, take note, guys. This is it. Okay, sorry for the drawing. It's an LS head. Sure is ugly. I can't do this with my hand, you know, through the computer. But you place a lower cut here. All right, it's not softening in a sense that you take the whole thing. This is preserving part of the quench. So a lot of the inflate flow come in. It'll loop around there, go an easier time to get to this position right here. I don't know, maybe you can extend that all the way there to a sharper point, but gradually coming down here. Okay, so it gets shallower when it gets to the end, but I think I prefer to do it this way. All right, so, and also let's not forget around the rich side as well, for intended purpose of pushing out the rich mixture to get combusted, and when the flame starts to expand, it goes right back in and consume whatever's left there. But that's my LS. Sorry guys, maybe if it was a Ford, I'd probably do just as bad a drawing.
This is one of Ben's attempts to somehow soften the combustion process or chambers.
This looks like an innocent looking piston. It's an old one from years ago, but take note of this flat area here. That is very important. It goes around the whole circumference of the piston. It is there for a purpose. Here's a side shot of that same piston. If you notice, this is not a dish, but it has a small amount of taper that I use. And take note of the ring position. It's for a turbo. And I did another one for a nitrous. And this is flat top. And you can see the tapering or the softening I applied on a piston. This is not a dish piston. Okay, this has a taper. Not on the head, but on the piston top. I hope this segment is very interesting to all of you, and please support my channel, and I'll bring more good information. This last V-groove explanation I hope makes sense to a lot of you. It's easily duplicated. Excuse me, I lay a head gasket on with the dowel pins on the head, Ford let's say, or with the pins on the small block Chevy head. You can lay down the gasket too and use that, and I start scribing with a sharp knife or X-Acto knife, whatever, or one of those scribers until I make a groove. Then I use a V file like so, and I start cutting through from the armor side of the head gasket to the center. It takes a lot of effort, a bit more practice, you'll get good at it, and it will be very rewarding for just about everybody, from low compression engines to race cars. Okay, so, and also let me just add, turbo, if you have or nitrous, if you have some kind of dome, depending on the combustion chamber you have, as long as you don't exceed your maximum compression, the dome is your friend, especially for nitrous. It has a tendency of slowing down the flame path because a dome really gets in the way. It kind of prevents it from accelerating to an explosion. So should we say, in the simplest term, it becomes a speed bump. But I will do more video explaining flat top. You know, why do we need a 12-15 degree angle cylinder heads for nitrous, and how sometimes a big chamber or should we say a low cylinder, sometimes where small combustion chamber can be an enemy of a nitrous engine, because now you don't have a dome to act as a speed bump. It becomes too quick, too fast of a combustion process. I will try to follow up with those kinds of videos, especially the ones that I have with Tim Halstead. I'm just like all sorts of stuff getting on my way, but those are up next, especially the Cleveland heads and some ultimate modification for just about any cylinder heads for Ford and LS that I will expose. Man, some of my customers are saying, I think you're screwing yourself up. But there's so much more. There's a lot more, okay? 30, 35 years, 40 years plus. I'm 66. Been racing since I was 17. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things. Not just you can compress everything in a year or 100 video. There's so much more. Thank you guys. Keep tuned in.